Thank you very much, and I would like to start today's discussion session. Thank you very much once again for coming over to our office, headquarters of United Nations University. We have met already, but today is very special, and I'm very happy to be here to facilitate today's discussion. Just before asking Senior Vice Director Professor Takeuchi, I would like to just draw your attention. This meeting is closed among our own participants listed here on the document. At the same time, our meeting is will be recorded, like a video and tape record. And toward disseminating to disseminate the outcome of our discussions, it will be disseminated after editing, at the same time after the feedback from yourself, and getting your approval before we disseminate the outcome. We seek your approval. That is the confirmation in our future process. Having said that, thank you very much once again. Let me invite the Senior Vice Director of UNU, Professor Takeuchi. Professor Takeuchi, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Takemoto. Mr. Andre Lacoste, former Chairman of the Nuclear Safety Authority, Dr. Richard Meserve, the former Chairman of the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission, Dr. Mike Weightman, former head of the Office for Nuclear Regulation, other HAP members and invited guests. Good afternoon. My name is Kazuhiko Takeuchi. I'm Senior Vice Director of the United Nations University here in Tokyo. I'm very pleased that you are all here for our fruitful discussion. More than 3 years after the terrible events of the 11th March 2011, and Japan is still struggling to deal with the consequences of the triple disasters, in addition to the huge amount of destruction caused by the earthquake, tsunami, and the nuclear accident at Fukushima Daiichi created a wide range of problems that do not respect academic disciplines, raising tough social, economic, political, legal, scientific, and environmental questions. Answering these questions will require the input from many different parts of Japanese society and the international community. It is in this context that United Nations University established, with the support of the Japanese government, particularly the Nuclear Regulation Authority, the Fukushima Global Communication Program. The UNU, with its headquarters here in Tokyo, felt a strong need to contribute to the difficult process of recovering from the accident and helping in the rebuilding of the Tohoku region. And we are very aware that while it is the people of Fukushima and the Tohoku that have suffered the most, the consequences of this accident go well beyond this region. It has led to the rest of the world to reassess the role that nuclear power should play in the future and to reconsider what type of risks we are collectively prepared for. The UNU has the advantage of being viewed as a neutral academic organization located at the intersection of Japan and the wider international community. Using this unique positioning, the UNU hopes to help in the advancement of communication and research on Fukushima to a wider global audience, while also drawing on international expertise and insight in helping to identify how Fukushima and Japan can deal with the many difficult challenges that it must deal with. As such, we are very happy to welcome Mr. Lacoste, Dr. Meserve, and Dr. Wellington to UNU today. We hope that you will be able to share with us your perspectives on how Japan is managing the simultaneous challenges of decommissioning Fukushima Daiichi, decontaminating the affected region, assessing those people and communities directly affected by the nuclear accident, instituting a new nuclear regulatory regime and trying to determine the safety of other reactors in a country that remains highly vulnerable to natural hazards. Having to respond to all of these challenges at the same time is an incredibly difficult task. Certainly, these are some experiences from previous accidents and other cases that can be drawn upon, but much of this is uncharted territory for Japan and other parts of the world. When considering the long list of challenges that Japan must deal with, the Fukushima Global Communication Project is particularly interested in the social dimension of these issues. How can we improve and restore the lives of those affected by the disaster? These social challenges are just as difficult as the technical ones TEPCO faces in decommissioning Fukushima Daiichi. How can we rebuild trust with communities that no longer believe what they are told by their governments or TEPCO? Regardless of actual radiation levels in decontaminated areas, many people do not believe what they are being told. What strategies can be implemented for rebuilding trust between affected people and the authorities? How can we better educate people about radiation, what is safe, what is not safe, and what we are still not completely sure of? Looking toward Japan's future, debate has been polarized into two opposed positions with little dialogue or negotiation in between on the role of nuclear power. For some, the lessons of Fukushima is that any risk of another nuclear accident is too great a risk and nuclear power in Japan must be abandoned forever. For others, there are risks involved with nuclear power, but these risks can be managed. Risk-free energy is not possible. Instead, we must assess the risk of nuclear power and compare it with the risks to the economy and environment from abandoning it, as well as the risks related to other energy sources. How can we move this debate forward so that we can have a better discussion about what kind of risks this country is still willing to tolerate and what role nuclear power should have in its future, given the disastrous consequences of the nuclear accident? These are just some of the difficult questions Japan is currently facing. We are very interested in hearing from you, your views and insights on these and other questions. In particular, we hope to hear whether there are any specific practices, experiences, or lessons taken from your home countries that could be valuable in helping Japan respond to these multiple challenges. We look forward to what we will hope will be a fruitful and rewarding discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Takeuchi, for your remarks. Now, let me invite the next speaker, Commissioner Oshima in LA. Commissioner, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Oshima. I represent the NRA at this meeting. Thank you very much, Dr. Takeuchi, for inviting me to say a few words and introduce the three eminent international advisors the NRA is very privileged to have to seek advice on its work. But before doing so, let me say just a few words on the Fukushima Global Communication Program, the FGC program. As just explained, the FGC program has an important mission for the collection of information and its dissemination to the international community on the Fukushima nuclear accident, particularly with human security perspective in mind. That in itself is certainly a high worthy mission, and that's why the NRA has had the pleasure to support it, including financially, in the next few years. The fact that this research and information project is being undertaken by a United Nations institute that is politically neutral and globally well networked provides an added value to it And the key approach chosen, that of human security, is a novelty, in my view, in this kind of exercise, which no doubt would provide an interesting perspective from which to collect, analyze, and disseminate facts and information. We hope that the FGC will offer new, interesting insights into the events and consequences of the catastrophic nuclear accident at Fukushima, Daiichi, with a special focus on human-related dimensions. That's why we wish the FGC program and its promoter, United Nations University Institute for Sustainability and Peace, a successful outcome that will eventually be appreciated and shared by all interested stakeholders in the international community. That said, now it's my pleasure and honor to introduce the three distinguished international advisors. Since they are all very well known and highly respected international figures in the world of peaceful uses of nuclear energy, as well as frequent visitors to Japan, they will hardly require introduction, so I shall be brief. First, Dr. Richard Meserve from this side of the table, from the United States. Currently, Dr. Meserve serves as president of the Carnegie Institution for Science, after having served as chairman of the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission under both President Clinton and President Bush. He led the NRC at a critical juncture in responding to the terrorism threat that came to the fore after the 9/11 attacks in 2001. In the international context, he has been very active, serving currently as chairman of the IAEA's International Nuclear Safety Group, INSAG group, and leading the IAEA's ongoing work on the Fukushima accident, which is a preparation of a comprehensive report on the Fukushima accident, which is an initiative launched by Director General Amano, and the report expected to be coming out sometime next year. I may add that in relation to the Fukushima accident, Dr. Meserve was one of the eminent persons interviewed by the Diet appointed investigation commission at the time. Next is Dr. Mike Weightman from the United Kingdom. Dr. Weightman has had a distinguished career in nuclear safety, nuclear security and regulation, serving at the top of the United Kingdom's regulatory body, ONR, Office for Nuclear Regulation, until his recent retirement. He has also been widely engaged in the work of international organizations such as the IAEA and OECD's Nuclear Energy Agency, NEA, including chairing NEA's Committee on Nuclear Regulatory Activities. And in INSAG, he also serves in INSAG, which is led, as I mentioned, by Dr. Meserve. He also teaches at Cambridge University as a visiting professor. In relation to the Fukushima accident, when the IAEA dispatched its fact-finding mission 2 months after the event in 2011, he joined it as the team leader and published its report. Then Monsieur Andre Lacoste from France. Monsieur Lacoste was formerly president of the French Nuclear Regulation Authority, ASN, for 7 years until his retirement a couple of years ago. France, as you know, is the world #2 nuclear power after the United States, with 58 reactors in operation and 3/4 of its electricity supply dependent on nuclear power, showing how important it is for the country. Currently, Dr. Lacoste is president of the review meeting of the contracting parties to the Convention of Nuclear Safety. I think it was a 1994 convention. And its 6th meeting just completed last April. at the IAEA headquarters in Vienna under the stewardship of President Andre Lacoste. I participated in this review meeting, myself representing the NRA. In relation to Japan, I should note that Monsieur Lacoste led the IAEA organized Integrated Regulatory Review Service mission, IRRS mission, to Japan back in 2007. And as you know, in the post-Fukushima context, the NRA has decided to receive another IRRS mission to Japan, which is planned for towards the end of 2015 or early 2016. I don't know whether Mr. Lacoste is willing to lead the mission again. So those are my brief introduction of the three distinguished international advisors that we are very privileged to have at NRA. And I myself very much look forward to lively discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Oshima, and also thank you very much for the introduction to the three overseas, the international advisors. And on behalf of the UNU, we are also very pleased to welcome all the international advisors. Taking this opportunity, I would like to briefly introduce today's participant. My name is Kazu Takemoto, Director of the Institute for Advanced Study of Sustainability. And from my side, Professor Tanaka. He is a professor of University of Tokyo. He is a member of high-level advisory committee of our program. Professor Kaoru Tachi, she is a professor of Oceanography University. She is also the member of high-level advisory committee. And Mr. Nick Turner of our program, the program officer. Chris Hobson, associate assistant professor of Waseda University. He is also visiting research fellow of our institute. Anna Mosneagar, the research associate of our institute. And we have today, we are very pleased to welcome the invited experts along with this list, Professor Paul Bacon, Waseda University, Professor Andrew DeWitt, Professor Rikyo University, thank you very much, and Professor Jack Hyman, Associate Professor, University of Southern California, and Mr. Tom O'Sullivan, thank you very much, and Mr. Uzeli, from Embassy of France in Japan. Now, let us start today's discussion. First, today we would like to make full use of the presence of international advisors. Three of them, we are very much excited to learn or hear from you again the program, Fukushima Global Communication Program, which has been already introduced in depth by Professor Takeuchi as well as Commissioner Oshima. And we are very happy to interact with three international advisors individually beforehand. Now, since we met for the first time, there are a couple of the development. We organized international conference in Fukushima, and we are getting into the second year of our program. Having said that, I would like to invite each international advisors in the order of introduction made by Commissioner Oshima, Richard Meserve, Mike Weightman, and Andre Lacoste, in such an order. Let me ask each of you any kind of suggestions, comment based on your own experience, professional expertise, because today is quite open, and we have not yet developed the specific questionnaire, but beforehand I have shared some the ideas, how we can discuss. But once again, as today's discussion is more flexible, dynamic, I hope, and please feel free to make any kind of suggestions and toward our program to move forward. Having said that, may I ask Richard Meserve? Please, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to join you and have further exchange with you beyond the one-on-one interactions we've had before. I'd also like to express my personal appreciation to Commissioner Oshima. We have, three of us have had the opportunity to interact with him in our role as international advisors to the Nuclear Regulatory Agency, and he's always been very helpful to us, and we very much appreciate his assistance. Mr. Takamoto had sent us an email yesterday and it asked if we would respond to 3 questions, and I'll try to answer those and then turn to the additional issue that Mr. Takeuchi had mentioned at the outset. The 3 questions we were asked were, first, what the observations are of the citizens of the country from which we come about the Fukushima accident. The second, to what information would be of most value to them. And thirdly, what actions would be of most interest. And I'll try to answer those questions. In order to do so, I think it's useful to divide the citizens into 3 groups. First, the general public. Second, nuclear experts. And third, the anti-nuclear community. As you'll see, they've drawn different lessons from the Fukushima accident. With regard to the general public, our experience, and I believe that some of the experiences of my colleagues, has been in the immediate aftermath of the accident, the polling would suggest that enthusiasm for nuclear power declined. But the quite remarkable thing is that it has now come back fully to where it was, or even above where it was. So there doesn't seem to have been any long-term effect with regard to the broad averages across the public. It's a different experience, I know, in Japan, about attitudes toward nuclear power. But the answer seems to be that this has not had a long-standing impact on the general public, at least in an average way. I don't know why that is. One could speculate that members of the American public think this is a Japanese problem, and they know that all the regulators in the world went and evaluated their plants in the aftermath of the accident and reported that they did not believe that the vulnerabilities were so great as to require the plants to be shut down, and that may have been reassuring to people. There may have been an attitude among the public, well, tsunamis don't happen in the United States. In fact, they do. There is that risk. And of course, we have external events of other kinds. And one of the important lessons from the Fukushima accident was the need to prepare for external events. But it could be that another aspect of this being a Japanese problem. Another possibility is that I think there are growing numbers of people in the United States are increasingly aware of climate change. And there is, at least in the policy community, a consensus that is developing that if we're to respond to climate change, nuclear power is essential. There's no way we can get across the world where we need to be in response to climate change without a significant contribution from nuclear power, as well as renewable and wind and efficiency and all the other things. But there's no item in our toolkit that we can decide we're not going to use. It is ironic, I have to add, and I mentioned the attitudes of the general public, is that, and this is puzzling to me, that there often is a complete misunderstanding about the risks. If one asks a member of the general public how many people died as the result of 3 Mile Island, this is, of course, a major accident in the United States, the answer from an average member of the public that hundreds died, maybe thousands. The fact of the matter is there was no release above environmental limits that occurred as a result of 3 Mile Island. And I suspect if you were to ask them how many died as a result of the radiological impacts of the Fukushima accident, they would say the same thing, that well, thousands died. And Of course, we all know that at least it appears to date that the health effects from the Fukushima accident, from a radiological point of view, were minimal. Other consequences, of course, were very severe. But anyway, so there's one group of people in the public who it doesn't seem that there's a lasting impact. The second group I mentioned were nuclear experts. In there, I have to say that in the United States, as elsewhere in the world, this accident has been taken very, very seriously. There are many lessons that have been learned and are being learned. A lot more serious attention to vulnerability to external events of all kinds. A great deal more concern and capacity to deal with beyond design basis events of all kinds. A lot of work with regard to mitigating severe accidents, emergency planning, and so forth. The confusion about the status of the spent fuel pools has driven a lot of work on making sure that there's instrumentation so you have an awareness of the temperatures and the water levels, and on and on and on. There's a very large number of activities that have been undertaken by countries around the world that have been driven by nuclear experts and what they have learned from the Fukushima accident and what they will continue to learn. That there is great interest, I think, everywhere on your experiences on decommissioning as people get into the reactors and learn the state of the fuel. That's going to take a while, but there is going to be great interest on actually the detailed progression of the accident, nature of the vulnerabilities of the buildings, and so forth. So I would say that there is huge and important information from the nuclear experts about what can be learned in the accident. The third community I mentioned is the anti-nuclear community. In the United States, that's a relatively small percentage of the population, but they clearly have been galvanized by the action, the righteousness of their beliefs that nuclear power is too dangerous to be used. They've been convinced as a result of the Fukushima accident that this is a very dangerous technology and it should not be used anywhere. It's a small percentage of the people in the United States. I mean, more than 10%, but probably less than 20. But the ones who are the strongest in that view have been galvanized as a result of the accident in their opposition to nuclear power. And they will have an influence because, as you may know, we've been extending the licenses of nuclear power plants in the United States. 70 or so plants have had license extended, most of them without any public controversy. I think going forward there will be public controversy on all of them that go forward, and probably most of the fleet will have its license extended. So I've said the attitudes and responses to the accident differ very much depending on how people have approached their philosophical views of the accident and perspective on the value of nuclear power. And I think that American experience may be different from that elsewhere, but that to tend to respond to the questions that you asked, Mr. Takamawa. I think that Mr. Takeuchi has raised a very important question about what are the fundamental lessons that should be learned from this accident that it's really important to convey to people, and there are many, as I've mentioned, from the nuclear excerpts have been drawn. But I would emphasize one very fundamental issue, which is a challenge in the United States and other countries, and is also a serious challenge in Japan. And that is the fundamental importance of safety culture. That is an attitude among the management of the companies that safety is the highest priority, that their fundamental obligation is to assure safety. Regulatory compliance is insufficient, that they need to be attentive to safety vulnerabilities. And the responsibility goes way beyond management. It goes down to every worker in the plant has to have a sense of individual responsibility to deal with safety issues that they encounter, even if it's not part of their responsibility. If they see a problem and their supervisor won't address it, it's their obligation to tell someone else and get someone else involved. And they should be protected and rewarded if they do so. That's a very hard thing to put in place in any country but it's a really fundamental foundation for assuring safe operations. I have a worry in Japan that one of the things that all of the reports that have evaluated the Fukushima accident have found is there have been failures in the safety culture. Failures of safety culture in the companies, failures of safety culture in the regulator. And I know that with the creation of GANSI, it's hoped that this will be dealt with. The creation of the Nuclear Regulatory Agency that hopefully will be helpful with fulfilling the regulatory responsibilities. But I do have a concern that it is billions of dollars that have been spent at each of the plants to put in engineering features to be able to respond to the accident, higher seawalls, various other pieces of equipment to be able to respond to issues. That's important to do. That there similarly have been, you know, we created an independent regulator and given them legal power and authority. But it's much easier to spend money and think you solve the problem by engineering fixes than it is to change culture. That's a much bigger challenge. It's much harder to do. And there is a danger that you spend so much effort fixing the engineering that you may think the problem's solved, we can go back to our old ways. And that's not going to be adequate for Japan or anywhere else. And I think it's very important that across the Japanese society that a critical role of safety culture is learned and applied. And I hope it is. There are institutions that are being started to be able to respond to the situation. And I hope that it's hopeful for the world that they are successful. So thank you very much. Pleased to have the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you, Dr. Richard Meserve, for your comment. Now let me invite the Mike Weightman, please.
Thank you very much, and it's my pleasure also to be here this afternoon and take part in such a distinguished company with colleagues about a fundamental issue. But also let me apologise, I have to leave a little bit early because I have to get to Hong Kong to give a keynote speech tomorrow on governance in Hong Kong and the associated Chinese mainland territory on contingency planning, emergency planning, which is another issue about communication and risk as well. So
there we are, in anticipation.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I can only but echo Dick's comments there, especially about Sam there, who's help and assistance through the past few years, and wisdom, may I say, as well, as served Japan and ourselves well. So thank you for that. Let me get on with some of these things. And I'll try not to repeat what Dick says, because I completely agree with you on those things. But let me just look at one of the things in this presentation on human security here. It says human security means freedom from fear, which I can understand, freedom from want. But it doesn't mean freedom from risk. And if you try and say that freedom from fear means freedom from risk, then I think you're in the wrong place. Because life is about risk. We take risks and we expose ourselves to risks day in, day out. It's part of living. It's how we evolve. It's how we grow. It's how we gain benefits. Because without being exposed to risks, there are no benefits there. And the question is, how much are you going to tolerate? Because tolerability means that you don't accept the risks, but you actually will tolerate them because you seek to achieve certain benefits. So the policy question really is about how much risk are you going to tolerate, or how much risk are your people willing to tolerate as well. And for some of that, I would suggest, rather than, and forgive me for you being precise on words, you don't educate the public. You provide them with information which they can make their own minds up about. And the issue is not to educate them in thinking correctly, but to provide them with substantial authoritative information about risks and the benefits of various technologies or various aspects of life. And unfortunately from Fukushima, there has been a fundamental break of the trust in the institutions, I believe, in Japan, and perhaps in the experts. And some of that becomes from perhaps not properly explaining before that nuclear technology is not free from risks at all. And that therefore, when something happens, people will say that institution is flawed. I don't believe government, I don't believe expert institutions, I don't believe the regulator, I don't believe people who say things that are absolutely safe. So I think we have to be honest in our communications with people, and I think we have to think about our institutions as well, and think about the, if I may use the term, nuclear values that underpin those institutions as well. And it relates back to Dick's point on safety culture there. Let me just explain a little bit about the UK situation. The basis of our legal system for health and safety in the UK is about risks. And the legal requirement is to reduce risks so far as is reasonably practical. Reasonably practical means there is gross disproportionality between the level of risk and reducing it further and the time, trouble and expense in doing so. So it's recognition in the law that risks are not absolutely reduced to nothing. There is a balance to be had against benefits and also in terms of the expense in doing that in time, trouble or money. And that is taken further forward in how we regulate, and we encourage, we push, we challenge our industry to reduce risk further until we are satisfied that reasonably they can't go further. And there is case law about what's reasonable as well. So there is some backing for that, but it's in coal mining, and it goes from the 1940s, 50s. So the basis in the UK is that expectation about risk management and risk tolerance as well. And perhaps that explains some of the, perhaps I thought it was peculiar British, but obviously it's peculiar USA as well, in that before the Fukushima accident there was a certain positive public opinion for nuclear development as part of an energy mix in the UK. And that's predominantly around climate change, about energy security. We know there is a large country in the European continent that sometimes turns the gas tap off. We want to be secure about that. But also there is an aspect that this is a high technical, expert technology, and it means good jobs in the locality, good jobs around as well. So there is a third element. But predominantly in the public's mind, I think it's climate change and energy security there. And so there was a positive aspect, and interestingly, in the UK, all three political parties, despite previous positions, have aligned round that policy in terms of, say, nuclear has to be part of an energy mix, not a predominant part, but part of an energy mix there. And so Fukushima happened, and that positive aspect dipped, but it did dip, and it's come back now more than it was before. And you may say that's peculiar British, but yes, perhaps it is. But perhaps in their minds they have also thought, well, if this is the very worst thing, perhaps we have been too concerned before. We know there are risks associated with everything we do. We know that if you try and use oil, sometimes you spill it. Sometimes it costs a lot of money, as it does in the States at times. We know if you use other technologies, there are disbenefits. Nothing is without disbenefits. But the political question is how you balance it and how you come to a decision there. So the question, and some of that was there were other aspects. Immediately afterward, we had experts in the UK coming on the media and giving their expert opinions, some from different viewpoints, but there was that debate in providing of information there. I produced a report for the UK government, a public report 6 weeks after, before I came to Japan, on the lessons for the UK nuclear industry. Now, we could have taken a stance where we said, well, tsunamis, earthquakes, in the UK we don't have those. The predictions are in 1 in 10,000 return period, it's about 1.5 meters high tsunami, if we can get there, about a 2.25 G earthquake with some margin 0.35 at that point there. We have different technology, we have advanced gas cooled reactors with a larger core, a higher thermal capacity, lower energy density, so the timescales for actually having something go wrong are much longer. We could have taken a sense, it's nothing, doesn't apply here. What we did, we said there are lessons to be learned here. So we took an approach that was saying, despite all that, part of the cultural element is that we should learn lessons from something. And some of that is related to the nuclear values that I just wanted to mention, which I think should underpin all the institutions, the industry, the regulators, and indeed the stakeholders, of how you engender a nuclear culture, how you perhaps give people confidence in the integrity of this industry, which has been lost, and in the integrity of expert opinions there. And so some of that is about a concept of humble leadership. And every organisation, every area, they need leaders, and then sometimes they percolate through the system, and the leader has to make decisions finally. And one of the questions we've been asking us 2 days is who makes the decision, which is interesting. In different cultures it's more a committee decision, but perhaps the committee has to show leadership there. And the leader, in being humble, one, the leader has to have a lot of inner strength, very strong. In a Western culture, I can talk about David and Goliath as an example of David, a small shepherd, managed to defeat a big army by having inner strength. And inner strength is, in a leader, is about being able to accept criticism, welcome it, accept challenge, accept people, listen to people, and being able to answer them, and perhaps take them into account, their views, but come to a final decision and stand by that and then explain why. So I think in the nuclear industry there has to be this concept of nuclear leadership, humble nuclear leadership. And I know the chief exec of EDF in the UK, Vincent Arribas, when there was a big oil spill in the US, and he was on the television, he was asked, I suppose the nuclear industry is very happy now because it's showing that the oil industry is dangerous. And he said, oh no, we need to learn the lessons from that. And that is a really good example to me of humble leadership, how we do that there. That has to underpin some other values about resilience, and also, but predominantly about integrity and being able to earn trust. I think the issue about trust, there has been quite a lot of work done in the UK on this, both via the Royal SOC, Royal Society, and also the House of Lords has a select committee and talked about risk communication and trust there as well. And some of that is about earning trust. You can easily lose trust, as we show from Fukushima, but the question is, how do you earn it? And you don't earn it by one thing, you earn it by a continuous way in which you work and what you do. People look at what you do more than what you say. And so it's the actions you take and the outcome of those actions and how you respond to people that really matter. Do you listen to them intently? Do you try and answer their questions? Do you really try and answer their fears? And try and provide them with information that they can make use of there. So I think that there is a need to seek to earn trust rather than just say, we are going to educate people and then they will trust us. I don't think you educate people. You treat them as rational human beings. and you seek to provide them with information that they need to make their own minds up. And you do it in an unbiased way. The beauty of science is that you can try and explain things. You may have different views, you may have different things, but you should base what we're saying on rationality, on objectivity, on facts and arguments. So in terms of looking at freedom from fear and freedom from want, but it doesn't mean freedom from risk. And I would suggest that one of the ways to rebuild trust is to start to talk about some of those aspects. That it's about earning trust, it's about providing information, it's about listening, learning and responding. And also it's about nuclear values that underpin an institutional system that is important in terms of three components: a strong, self-regulated industry that has true allegiance to the nuclear values, a strong independent nuclear regulator with similar allegiance to nuclear values, which include openness and transparency and accountability, to the third barrier, which is stakeholders who hold the first two to account for their responsibilities. And to do that, they need openness and transparency and accountability as a way of life in both the nuclear industry and the nuclear regulator. And I think in those ways, then you rebuild trust, but it will take a long time, and it takes much effort. As Dick says, it's easy to do the technology fixes. To do the human fixes is much more difficult and much more challenging. So I'm glad you're doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike Weightman, for your comment. Now let me invite Mr. Lacoste. Monsieur Lacoste.
Thank you for inviting me. I would just add something to my biography. It was presented by Commissioner Shima. I've been the head of the French nuclear regulatory body for 90 years. During 13 of these years, I was supposed to report to ministers, but I did not receive any order at any time. And then I got my legal independence. The French Nuclear Safety Authority became an independent domestic authority. But what I said is that, of course, we were de facto independent, we were legally independent, but our motto was being independent does not mean to be isolated. I think we could go on discussing that a bit later. I would just like to raise three issues which are linked with my present position of chairman of the review meeting of the Convention on Nuclear Safety. First, the meeting itself, 800 people, 2 weeks, 75 contracting parties, a huge organization. National reports, I must in particular underline the fact that the Japanese report was quite remarkable, open, informative. There were quite a good discussion, and I think this is largely due to the participation of Commissioner Oshima. That's really an excellent Japanese report. May I ask, it was not a habit of receiving good Japanese report in this kind of meeting. The final position which was taken was the position saying that nuclear power plant should be designed, constructed, and operated with the objective of preventing accidents, of course, and should an accident occur, mitigating its effects on avoiding oxide contamination. Avoiding oxide contamination, of course, the wording is too strong, I would say, but the idea is clear. The idea is to draw the consequences of Fukushima Daiichi and to say that the environmental consequences of Fukushima Daiichi are unacceptable. The second idea is that this kind of objective should be applied to existing plants. And I think that this leads to a real issue. You are dealing with this issue in Japan. All countries are dealing with that issue. What can be done to improve the safety of existing plants? And when I say improving the safety of existing plants, it's not only a question of hardware, it's also a question of software or safety culture. And I think there is always a danger. I totally share the opinion which was expressed by Richard. There is always a danger of forgetting the safety culture part of it. It's easier to make a report on the money which has been spent to improve safety. There will be a topical meeting on that issue probably at the end of next year. I think it could be quite an important meeting point for that fundamental issue. My second topic is a topic I raised at the end of my of the review meeting of the Convention on Nuclear Safety. I raised the following question: in which country is the safety authority able to say clearly that a nuclear accident is possible in this country? No, we are in a funny situation. In all nuclear countries, almost all of them, there are emergency drills. Emergency drills are meaningless if there is not the possibility of the perspective of a nuclear accident. But in quite a number of countries, in the same time, nobody says clearly there could be an accident. And this was clearly the case in Japan. I came to Japan maybe 12 or 14 times. I had the opportunity to visit magnificent emergency or crisis center. But obviously, nobody was believing that an accident was possible. Nobody. So I can imagine the surprise of Japanese citizens when they felt that they knew that there was an accident. On the opposite part, I will take something I'm proud of in France. You know, the French safety authority always said an accident is possible in France. We say it in three different ways. An accident is always possible in France. Nobody can guarantee that there will never be an accident in France. Or third, what is improbable or unlikely is possible. And in 2005, I launched a huge program, which is called CODIRPA, the Steering Committee for Post-Accidental Management, in which we started to examine what should be done to deal with the consequences of a huge accident. 2005, we are still working, my successor is still working on it, but more than 300 people are now working on it. That means the operators, national administration, local administration, elected people, NGOs, citizens, and so on. Since 2005, we'll never be finished, but that means that quite a number of people are aware of the fact that an accident is possible. And I think this is a way to answer a part of the question which was raised at the beginning of this meeting. I think that if the government or the safety authority or the operators of a country are not clear on the fact that an accident is possible, of course, when the accident occurs, and it can occur, it will be a bad surprise for anybody. My third idea is a difficult one. This is the idea of collective responsibility. I come back to that review meeting of the Convention on Nuclear Safety. Somebody, which some of you know, which is Philippe Jamet. Philippe Jamet was the director for nuclear safety inside the IEA. He is now one of the French commissioners. Raised and said, you know, I feel that all of us here, hundreds of people, have a part of a collective responsibility for not preventing Fukushima Daiichi accident. I totally share his view, especially because I was the team leader of the NIS mission in 2007. But what surprised me, people raise their hand and say no, refuse that concept of collective responsibility. I think this is a real issue. I think that when this collective responsibility applies to countries, it applies to safety authorities, it applies to utilities, it applies to any kind of organization. When one of us finds that something is wrong, not only in this country, but somewhere else, in an organization, in another authority, we should do something. And doing something is not just shouting, or probably not shouting, but trying to do something. I must say there are indicators. Let's just take some examples. Some countries pretend that they are contracting parties of international conventions. They are contracting parties. They don't fulfill any of the obligations of the international convention. And among these countries which do not fulfill the obligation, there are countries which pretend to launch nuclear programs. I take some example, Bangladesh, Jordania, Saudi Arabia. There are some countries which do not demand any kind of RS mission or SAT mission from the agency in Vienna. That means that they try to have something. There are countries in which the utilities don't really participate in one of them. There are countries where it's quite obvious that there is a lack of transparency and a lack of openness. I think that quite a number of us are aware of that. What can we do? And I think this is a question for us, all of us. And when I say to all of us, to each of us. Personally, I have in my mind a list of countries in which I don't like the situation. Of course, the way forward is not to publish that list, but I have that list in my mind. I try to share my concern with other people, other organizations, in order to try to prevent or to reduce the probability of an accident happening. But we see how difficult it is. Because on one side, you have the concept of national responsibility for nuclear safety, but on the other side, you have the fact that nuclear accidents have consequences much further than just inside the borders. These were my three questions. I thought some answers to your question.
Thank you, Mr. Lacoste, for your comment and suggestions. Thank you very much. Again, all the international advisors. Now, I would like to open the floor. From now, we are going to have the discussions session. Now, I do not have any list of speakers, and please feel free to make any questions, comments, whatever the observation. This is a very good opportunity among us to exchange. And from you and you staff members as well as invited experts, please feel free to make any comments and questions. Floor is open. Chris, please kick off.
Okay, I was trying to be polite, but all the experts are quiet. So this is actually, I guess, an open question, but I'd also actually like to hear the Commissioner's perspective on this as well. So I mean, I think one thing which is common across all of your presentations were the emphasis on building kind of safety culture, emphasizing the importance of safety culture. And I think in some ways saying, this is partly about kind of building a culture in which there can be kind of critical feedback. You can challenge the opinions of your superiors. You can disagree, and there's a genuine culture where criticism is possible. Now, my question is, I would suggest that a lot of these characteristics are a lot more culturally acceptable in Western culture. I'm Australian. You're also from Western countries, and I'm wondering how well these kind of things can operate in a Japanese context, where perhaps criticism can be received in a different manner, or there's a different set of relationships in terms of the leader and people working underneath him. So maybe how have you found the NRA has been dealing with trying to incorporate safety culture, and also from the perspective of Commissioner Shimon?
Okay. Any? Please. Okay.
In my third issue, collective responsibility, there was an issue of safety culture applied at another level. But if you define safety culture as a questioning and learning attitude, this is exactly that. Sorry for that.
Yeah. Mike, please.
Yeah. If I may add, I don't think you can exclude any culture. I think that all cultures are different, but the thing is to look at that culture and see how you can bring out some of the attributes you're after through that cultural aspect. One of the things I'm doing at the moment, actually, for a student at Cambridge, is looking at the use of nuclear values worldwide. It's difficult. Not all organisations like to expose themselves to that. And then looking at how those values, how you can use different cultures with those values underpinning them. So I don't think one culture is better than another. I think there are differences, and some of it gets into comparative religions and some of those other areas. But I think the nuclear culture, safety culture, can underpin a lot of positive culture. The issue really is how you go about it. I don't think you can regulate a culture. I don't think in an organisation you can have more than one culture. It confuses people. So I don't believe in the way perhaps use safety culture, security culture, safeguards culture, or whatever. You have to have a nuclear culture there. And so it is an example. In the UK, when you go around a site, as I have many times, I look at how the chief executive or the head of the site interacts with people. I'm an engineer, so it's peculiar for me. I'm used to hard stuff. And one of the interesting things is when you see people right at the bottom of the organisation being able to go up to the station director and say, oh, you're carrying 2 bags, let me carry one for you so you can hold a handrail. So they're not saying you've done something wrong, director. They're saying, let me assist you in making sure you do it right. So it's a question how you try and explain this. How does regulate try and influence? Because you can't regulate, but you have to recognise when you're regulated, you can influence a culture for bad or good. So the way in which you go about your regulations, it matters. If you go in needlessly trampling all over everybody, you will put a bad influence on that culture. So it's how you go about it. So I wouldn't discount being able to, I think there are some aspects of what little I know about the Japanese culture that really would help drive this home. One of the statistics I told my colleagues about this morning was I understood that 75% of the mobile phones in Tokyo that are lost are given back to the police. That's amazing in a Western culture. You know, I just can't understand how what would happen in the UK if all those put the mobile phone manufacturers out of business. There are some very positive things, and you have to look at the way in which you can use those. So it's how you go about it, I would suggest.
Thank you, Richard.
I think I very much agree with Mike that the challenges that one has in establishing appropriate safety culture may differ from country to country. I have had a conversation with many good friends in Japan, and I've talked to them about this issue. And I think you raise an interesting question that I think needs to be confronted. That they tell me that one of the things that children are taught, sort of a metaphor, is the nail that stands up gets hammered down. That it's important to be a member of the group and have solidarity with the group, and that identifying, protecting your group, protecting your boss is part of something that is, in many respects, a very commendable aspect of Japanese culture. And is that consistent with the notion that individuals have responsibility and should stand apart from the group if they think they're doing the wrong thing is happening? So there is, I think that you raise a question that I think that people seriously should ask. And I think all Japanese should ask this question about themselves. I would observe that somehow in some industries you've overcome that. If one looks at Japanese automobiles, one understands that they taught the world how to build automobiles that had fewer mistakes in their production than anywhere else. And it's because they gave every worker on the assembly line the right pull the cord and stop the line if there was a mistake in a car that came by, and they figured out what went wrong and they repaired it in every car. You know that they said that Mercedes cars had a few errors just because they get built 3 or 4 times. They have a huge quality control. Japanese learned how to do it right the first time. There's something that they learn about how to take a group responsibility and turn it into something of individual responsibility. And you've got to learn to do that in the nuclear world as well. And the way you do that in Japan may be different than the way you do it in France or the UK or the United States. But it clearly is possible. And exactly how you do it is something that Japanese need to figure out. I mean, you know how to adapt your culture. And that is something that we can't tell you. It's important to figure out how to do it, though.
Thank you. Mr. Lacoste, please.
Just a share what was said by Mike and Chad, but in my mind, I keep a memory of a series, of example, where safety culture did not work. A series of cases where bad welding were hidden for 10 or 15 years, something like that. So I think our margin for progress stays for us.
Thank you. Are there any, please?
Thank you very much for your presentations, and I have one question. Our team dealing the Fukushima global communication is emphasizing the importance of the mental aspect of the people's behavior, which is quite significantly related with the discussion that we are now doing on culture and also the communication. But because of the lack of the trust, many people are much worried about the kind of situation than the scientific level of the radiation, for example. In that case, how we could recover the trust through the recovery with the communication with the people, particularly their mental aspect would be extremely important. And I would like to know from you how we should think about for the mental aspect of the people's, particularly the safety awareness.
Thank you. Mr. Lacoste.
Maybe just a preliminary. I don't like the objectives of getting the trust. I think the real objective is deserving the trust. And this is a tough task, especially when something wrong has occurred, in which you are the responsibility. Obviously, the first component which is needed is time.
Mike?
Yeah, I just echo what I said earlier. You earn it. You earn to deserve it. That trust. I think you start by listening, and listening is active. Listening is not. Yes, I heard you. This is listening and trying to understand what is the deep-seated question that they're really asking. And I think the way you communicate with them and provide information to people is put it in a comparative basis. You have to and use different opinions. Part of my when I was head, I introduced discussions with all the NGOs, and those were interested, had different views. But sometimes they would keep their colleagues and correct them because they were, by being so difficult, they were diminishing the overall argument. I think you have to listen, though, to people and try and communicate, give them information in a way that they can understand and put it on a comparative basis. So, for example, if you release information about the contamination in seawater, a lot of scientific numbers, it doesn't mean anything to anybody, because all they say is, well, you've got radiation in the seawater. And the fact that it's such a minor level, that it has no consequence whatever, and compare it with something else, is important. And then I'll give you a very simple example. I led this fact-finding mission. We went around Fukushima Daiichi for about a day. 10 weeks after the accident, there was still quite a lot of radiation around. And how much increase in my risk of death do you think I had from that visit? It was about for the next year, it's about 1,000 of my normal chance of death. It's about a 1 in 100 at my age to die next year. So that increase in, if I told you how much radiation was, it might not mean a lot. But if I try and put it into a context of, say, my normal chance of death is about, the next year is 1 in 100, my normal chance of death is 1, because I'm going to die one day, it's just a question when. But then try and put in the risk that you're exposed to in terms of those comparative things. So comparative communication is important rather than absolute communication when you do that. And I think even now, the way in which some of the communications in Japan are occurring is very much in an absolute basis of scientific data, not in putting it into common parlance, common way of talking.
Okay. Thank you. Lacoste, Mr. Lacoste.
In the same page, in a country from France, there is a habit which is to try to discuss with everybody, every kind of stakeholder, including people who are terribly pro-nuclear, I don't like them, including people who are not definitive opinion, including opponents. And it's quite interesting to work with opponents, and it's quite interesting to ask opponents to become part of the decision process. Yeah. I take the example of what we call permanent group of experts, which give an advice to the French Commission. There are 8 of them. In each one of them there are opponents, and some of them are chaired or vice-chaired by opponents. Just take the example of one of the group dealing with radiation protection. It's vice-chaired by an opponent to nuclear energy. As soon as he's ready to work in deontological conditions, why not? And it changes totally the atmosphere.
Thank you. Richard?
I think you've heard 3 suggestions from them about how you establish this. One, you have to earn trust. Suggestions you've heard, one is to listen carefully. The second is to communicate effectively in a way people will understand. Third is to involve people, feel that they have a part of the process. The fourth one I would add, beyond the 3 that have been spoken to, is complete honesty. It is, you have to establish that even uncomfortable facts are ones that you're prepared to tell people about. And you don't hesitate that, but you demonstrate by complete honesty that you're dealing with them. And that people will trust you if you're prepared to tell them bad things that are true. We went through this in the United States, that this 3 Mile Island was a huge impact. It took a long time. It will take a long time, obviously, in Japan as well, but I think that you've gotten 4 suggestions about how you might approach it.
Thank you. Professor Tanaka.
Thank you very much. Before Mike go back, I want to ask you to. Okay, so I think you visit Japan many times. Okay, before Fukushima, and also after Fukushima, you visit Japan many times, and also other international NRA international advisor meeting you visited maybe one times. And I think you repeated many times same advice or same comment to us. So I want to know your observations. Japan has changed or not? If your advice or comment have not been reflected to the situation in Japan, I want to know what's the main reason, what's the why it has not been reflected.
I have to go. My apologies.
Okay.
And I think I would just mirror that comment back to yourselves. You know Japan inside out. I have been fortunate to be exposed to it a little bit. And it's that self-reflection that might be best. Because you know the culture, you know the people, you know, the institutions far better than we could possibly do. And I wouldn't have the arrogance to try and tell you how to do that. So I just put a mirror up. but apologies, I must dash to catch a flight.
Please,
and I'm sorry I can't complete, but it's been fascinating.
That's all right. And please feel free to leave anytime beyond this. Andre, please.
A personal memory, I was the team leader of IS mission in 2007. The first draft of our report was quite explicit. There was still a lot of pressure saying, if you want to get something, please write it down more of my thing. But I think the report was still quite understandable. For several years, I asked for the organization of a follow-up mission. I've already said so, but at the end of October 2010, beginning of November 2010,
Maybe there are one kind
four
of,
years, 4 months before Fukushima, for the first time I had an answer. The answer was, the Japanese government had decided not to give any follow-up to your report.
Now, okay, I saw 2 hands. We can get both, the Andrew and followed by Tom. Andrew, please.
Just push this. Yeah. There's an emphasis. These are really fascinating presentations. Thank you very much. There's an emphasis on safety culture and how it requires scope for whistleblowers. I wonder if there's perhaps a contrary thing going on in Japan. And for example, Martin Fackler, the New York Times Tokyo bureau chief, made this argument at a recent, what is that, the journalist, that there's actually a retrograde movement going on inside Japan about freedom of information through the Abe government secrecy laws and self-policing and so forth. And so I wonder how that squares with the emphasis on the culture of safety that requires scope for the whistleblower to be able to blow the whistle. Is there not a retrograde movement going on in the legal framework?
Andre, yeah, please.
I think that procedure of a whistleblower can be useful, but I would say it's the last line in the defense line process. I think that there are overlines before that. Let's just take an example. Are the main managers of the CEOs or the ministers able to recognize that they have made a mistake before being forced to do so? Personally, I had several times, the chairman of the French ISA, had to say, okay, we were wrong before being forced to do so, and I think it changed totally the culture of your organization and it changed the culture of the utilities. So just counting on the whistleblowers, I think, would be missing. It could be useful, it's useful, but there are quite a number of other lines of defense which should operate before that. This is at least my opinion.
Richard?
Let me push back a little bit. When I was discussing what the expectations of the safety culture should be, it was in anticipation that you have internal processes that encourage people to come forward. The normal context of a whistleblower is someone who's been suppressed and has had to go outside the institution and report things outside of the institution. That's not what I've been talking about. You want to have a situation where they don't have to do that you have an openness and a willingness to confront inside the organization. Obviously, you need to have a safety valve if that doesn't work, but what you want to have is a situation where the people don't feel they need to go outside the organization to have issues addressed. You don't need whistleblowers of the same role because of the fact that they are in an organization that welcomes them to come forward with their concerns.
Good.
And I can't comment about the Abe government and its policies in other areas. I'm not sufficiently knowledgeable to be able to give you informed views on that.
May I just add that it's easier for a government to say we will try to protect the whistleblowers and to try to really deal with the issue of safety culture. you can easily make a law about whistleblower to protect them. I think this is the 20th tier of the program to be implemented.
Sorry, you respond. Okay.
Can I just ask
Please,
a very short question, just building on this? So I mean, you might have heard, so recently in Japan there is this question about whether the 777 or so interviews that were taken as part of the Diet Commission, the Prime Minister's Commission, wasn't it? Whether these should be released to the public or not. And I mean, do you think this is simply information overload, or actually releasing all of these interviews be a way of assisting this kind of process?
Well, there may be some sensitivities here about which I'm completely unaware, but my instinct is that that particularly in the nuclear area, the things that happen behind closed doors cause fears and suspicions that something improper has been going on. And that if you're dealing with these issues, you better to deal with them openly and forthrightly. Now, I have no idea whether the details of these interviews, but I mean that having processes that are open is healthy.
Thank you, Richard. And Andre, you have?
Just
please,
something, just an addition, you know. In a French law about safety, there is an article which says that each citizen has the right to any information about nuclear safety and knowledge acquisition. Any information, that means not only written document or prepared document, any information. Something which is funny is that that article is not used by quite a number of citizens. I think citizens are not aware of the powerful tool they could have.
Okay, thank you. Tom?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Takuma Sensei. I just wanted to touch on the economics of nuclear just for a minute, and possibly Richard's perspective and also Andre's perspective. Obviously, in Japan at the moment, power charges are probably the most expensive in the world. We're probably paying in the region of 30 cents a kilowatt hour versus perhaps 15 cents a kilowatt hour in the United States, maybe 7 euro cents per kilowatt hour in France. So, you know, the numbers for some of the remedial actions are quite enormous. You know, Rokasho, for example, by all accounts, $21 billion has been spent on Rokasho, on the reprocessing facility, and it is still not operating effectively, and maybe also there are storage issues there. I think Professor DeWitt is familiar with this, but Jeff Kingston mentioned in an article in the last few days that it would cost $245 billion to build a proper restructuring facility over the next 40 years. So I was just wondering what Richard's perspective on this is, if he doesn't mind to comment on it. I understand, obviously, you're coming at this from the United States, but obviously there is some concerns in Japan on the ground here in terms of power charges that people are having to pay.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, before the seeking the response, I would like to take up one more question as a last from Ambassador Uderi, please.
Thank you. I'm not yet ambassador, but also one day. Please let us know. It's not so much a question and a comment. I mean, I used to work in the nuclear industry in Japan. And this question of safety culture, I mean, being one of the executives was something important. And I would say, I think it's, coming from outside, coming from the Anglo-Saxon world, you say it's a matter of criticism, and Japan is not good at criticism. It's also a matter of consensus, and the US or Europe is not good at consensus. It's really a matter of asking the right question and making sure that people answer the questions. You don't necessarily need to criticize your boss. What I was expecting from the people is that when they say something which doesn't work, they come to their boss and say, hey, I've seen that. And what I expect from the boss is that they say, I look at it, let's look at it together. That's what we want to do as part of safety culture. It's not so much of antagonizing people, it's having people asking the right questions. And I fully share what Dick said previously. Japan is extremely good in the process for quality. So why can't Japan can be extremely good in safety? And then you come to the management position. What do you value? How you get organized to get that thing going? So I mean, from my personal experience, having worked in the Japanese industry, I've seen a lot of things that I would not like to see. I've seen a lot of things that I would not have seen in other places, which were very good. And I think the process could be, I mean, the Japanese process, the Japanese culture could also be good for safety culture. It's just a matter of having people asking the right questions. And that is also a matter of management. And the second point I would like to make is, I mean, Japan is a very technological country. And nuclear is very technological work. So there is a kind of tendency to have an over-reliance on the engineering things. And I think part of the reason is also that when you have an issue of safety, you want first to fix it by engineering, and there is not enough when you're thinking about the human factor. And that is partly because Japanese culture is very high-tech, but partly because the nuclear industry all over the world is a culture of engineer, and they expect that you can fix that. And another way to improve safety culture, from my experience, is first to have people talk to each other. And when I was executive in this nuclear industry in Japan, we organized some benchmarkings and discussions with similar plants in US and in France. And the second is to introduce people of a different culture within your own organization. And I know that in some nuclear safety or TSOs, you have some sociologists, this type of people, and this type of people will bring some things that the engineers will not see, and that can also improve safety culture. Mm-hmm. That's just a small witnessing.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Guzeri, for your comments. Now, on Tom's question on economics, may I ask Richard to respond?
Tom, let me be clear. Are you asking a question about reprocessing costs or about the cost of power?
Yeah, I think total life cycle costs, Richard, for perhaps the nuclear initiative, just to get your perspectives.
Well, actually, the cost issue for nuclear power is something that actually we're confronting very directly right now in the United States. We have the benefit at the moment of extraordinarily low prices for natural gas, with the result that the structure of energy markets are changing. If you have a belief that natural gas prices are going to stay where they are, you would never build anything else other than a natural gas plant. And it just, we pay in the order between $4 or $5 a million BTU, where it's $14 or $15 a million BTU here in Japan. And the expectation is that that's not going to stay at that level forever, but if you think it's going to stay low, then you build a natural gas plant. And of course, building a natural gas plant is, the capital cost is much, much less than any other type of generation capacity, so you have all kinds of incentives to go in the natural gas direction. Despite that, there are 5 nuclear power plants that are being built in the United States, and we wonder why in the world are they doing it. And I think that there are a couple of reasons that justify at least considering nuclear power. One is that you build a nuclear power plant, you do have price stability, and that you don't have the same fluctuation price over time. You know that over the life of the plant, you have a pretty good idea about what you're going to pay. And so you have a price stability that you do not have with other fuels, and that's particularly the case for natural gas, where the prices, in fact, historically have changed very significantly over time. There is as well the reality that the fuel is on site in a nuclear power plant for long periods of time, and you go many years before refueling. Whereas in a natural gas facility, you're dependent on the flow that's coming from a pipe to you. The polar vortex situation actually revealed the real vulnerability of reliance on natural gas in the United States, and we're very close to being in a serious position. There just wasn't enough natural gas that could be pushed through those pipes to meet the needs. And of course, in the generation side, the carbon, the fact that there's no carbon from the production from a nuclear power plant. There is carbon, of course, that is embodied in the actual construction of the plant. But from a greenhouse gas perspective and a life cycle basis, nuclear does very well in comparison with other technologies, including renewable technologies, in terms of the total carbon impact. That's nothing that's priced in the system now, but there is, on a policy level, growing awareness that it should be. and that you ought to compensate low carbon sources. That includes renewables, hydro, as well as nuclear, but there should be a benefit there. And then the final factor you think about is basically a comparative risk issue. We have risks that come from nuclear. Both Mike and Andre have talked about this, that one has to acknowledge honestly and forthrightly. But there are risks for other technologies too, that for the case of coal, there are real deaths that occur in the case of coal. Particularly from particulates that are released by coal plants, that the fine particulates, there are thousands of deaths that are attributed in the United States to the reliance on coal that are really happening. They're not hypothetical risks. So there's trade-offs. Everything has risks associated with it. So you have you get all of these balance of things together, and I think you arrive at a conclusion that a portfolio of energy sources is valuable. It gives you some resilience. It gives you some protection on price, and that nuclear should be part of the picture.
Thank you, Richard. Andres, brief
situation.
After the Fukushima Daiichi accident, in Europe there was a campaign of stress tests. And the stress tests were applied country by country. In a normal process, we asked EDF, the main utility, to make proposals in order to meet the goals of we had fixed. There were proposals, there were difficult decisions, there were technical decisions, but at the end of it, we made decisions. It was quite difficult, the discussions were quite difficult, but I think that everything went in an atmosphere of what I would call mutual respect. And this is something quite important. Even if the safety authority and EDF don't agree, EDF knows that we will make the final decision. But we have respect for what EDF said, and I think that EDF has respect for what you have said. And I think that this mutual respect has been built for decades and decades, and I think this is terribly important.
Thank you.
If I may make a personal remark, this is perhaps something still to be improved in Japan.
Yeah. Thank you. Tom, sorry, time is very limited, and of course, you may have lot of the question and comment, but I'm concerned about timing. And let me invite Professor Takeuchi for closing and, if necessary, wrapping up, please.
Because time is very limited, I'd like to thank the three speakers for your very informative presentations, and also I'm very pleased that we could have a very productive exchange of ideas, and I understand that we could get some sort of consensus by highlighting of the importance of understanding of nurturing of the safety culture, for example. And also, in order to recover the trust, it takes time, and also we must be very honest, and so on. So these sort of things are highlighted, and I'm very pleased that Commissioner Oshima allowed us to use your NRA's advisor, and we could have a very good discussion, and I hope that we could further continue our discussions in the future. So thank you very much for coming today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.